Well, it's election season, and in the run-up to June 5th, we're going to take a look at Regional Measure 3 today. That's the $4.5 billion bridge toll hikes that would increase fees from $5 to $8 by 2025 on 7 of the Bay Area bridges. GENNADY, you've been covering this issue and had a long talk with some of the supporters. Who exactly is supporting Regional Measure 3 and who is opposing it?
Well, MTC is the big supporter and the proponent and the people who kind of put the list of projects together. But they also have quite a bit of support from the business community in South Bay and elsewhere. The Silicon Valley Leadership Group has been heavily involved in promoting Regional Measure 3. They've been making the rounds and kind of making the case for the measure. And there's quite a few local officials and state officials. Most of the representatives, or I should say many of the representatives of our region support it, like Jerry Hill, Mark Berman, the assemblyman, and Mayor Liz Ness. I'd say that a bare majority of the city council has gone out on the record in supporting it. But needless to say, there's quite a bit of opposition.
There are some opposers. That includes JOCELYN.
Yeah, JOCELYN is one of the prominent opponents of Regional Measure 3, and also Lenny Siegel from Mountain View, the mayor. For different reasons, they think it doesn't address the right projects, and it doesn't. It puts too much burden on people crossing bridges. It's too regressive, basically.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So this is a regional measure, and you mentioned the Metropolitan Transportation Commission earlier. There have been very kind of piecemeal approaches to trying to solve what this measure is aimed at, which is traffic congestion. People are commuting all across the Bay Area to get to work. So I understand the concept that we need to approach the solution regionally, but I would say that looking at the projects and how they're kind of distributed, some areas of the Bay Area would get more benefit from others, and I think that's one of the issues that's come up so far.
Yeah, and I would say it's not really unique to RM3 either. I think there's been quite a bit of gripes from Palo Alto and other areas in between San Jose and San Francisco who have voted to support prior county or regional measures but haven't gotten the benefits because so much money has gone to huge projects relating to BART or Caltrain, things like that. So that is also a factor here in why some people don't oppose it. They don't think some of the projects that would impact this area are as significant as what San Jose would be getting, for example, with BART, or San Francisco with Caltrain. So that remains a factor. But I think it's also kind of worth noting that even though this area probably won't be getting as much, they also won't be paying as much, which is one reason why Mayor Liz Ness thinks it's a good idea, because people here don't cross that many bridges, and because it is a bridge toll, it would impact her constituents less than those elsewhere.
Yeah.
What are some of the projects here that will benefit our area?
I guess the two big ones have to do with Dumbarton. The bridge, basically, it would boost the Dumbarton Express bus service, so to help commuters from the East Bay. And Mark Berman, when I spoke to him, was very vehement about the fact that this is a huge deal for Palo Alto because it is going to take care of some of the major choke points that affects University Avenue and kind of Crescent Park area. And the other, probably the second biggest one, has to do with Highway 102 and 92 interchange,
92 and 101.
which is a little bit north of Palo Alto, but it's in San Mateo County, and I'm sure a lot of people who commute to and from Palo Alto up and down the peninsula could probably testify that that's a major choke point. And so RM3 would allocate some funds to modify the ramps, kind of try to make that situation a little bit better.
Yeah, it's interesting that the $130 million for the Dumbarton corridor, so people need to know that there's no changes actually happening to the bridge itself. It's more addressed towards public transit and kind of boosting ridership there by making like bus-only lanes and trying to get the buses across as fast as possible, changing the Bayfront Expressway.
Yeah, exactly. With $130 million, there's only so much you could do. I mean, it's a lot of money for like a local project, but if you're talking about like a regional project, when we're talking about great separation, we're talking about hundreds of millions, sometimes billions. So $130 million would kind of let them do design work, do some environmental work and some construction for these kind of limited improvements on the Dumbarton corridor. But as you mentioned, it's not going to really transform it into this big kind of rail connection
Yeah.
between East Bay and here.
Yeah, I mean, the Dumbarton corridor improvements have been planned for a while, and I was reading some of the materials, and it didn't sound like the exact improvements have been chosen yet. So in some ways, we're voting for all this money to go to that area, but we don't know for sure. You know, that's going to be the bus-only lane. We don't know for sure what all these projects are that are going to get funded. We only know that there are certain priorities that
Yeah,
are laid out.
there was like a master plan put together for Dumbarton in 2016, and I guess it had a set of recommendations that I think these funds will kind of explore and will help address. But again, aside from like expanded bus services, it's kind of hard to figure out at this point what kind of major improvements this is going to create. And I should also point out, well, these are the kind of localized projects. I think proponents of ARM3 will tell you that some of the others, like improving core capacity of Caltrain or BART, would help pretty much everybody here, even if you can't cut a ribbon in Palo Alto for improving Caltrain.
Yeah.
There are quite a few people who take it to get to and from Palo Alto and Mountain View, those areas.
Yeah.
So just because it's not localized here, that's what the proponents would say, does not mean that it's not going to impact the riders here.
Right, yeah, and I think that argument has, you know, some merit because a lot of people are crisscrossing the Bay Area to get to places. If they're taking BART down to San Jose instead of driving, or if BART can now go not only to San Jose, but eventually to Santa Clara and then catch Caltrain, you know, the net effects would probably be positive in their view.
Yeah, and by the same token, the people who commute from here or from Mountain View or these cities to San Francisco for jobs, because San Francisco, you know, Palo Alto isn't the only job region. I mean, they'll probably benefit from having more trains and extra stop in downtown San Francisco, so they wouldn't have to get off at, you know, 4th and King and take buses out there.
And Ubers.
Yeah, and Ubers. So there's that.
Yeah. So when you spoke with Carl Guardino, he brought some statistics. There was a poll done in December showing some support for the measure.
Yeah, he brought up a few polls that the MTC conducted, I think, late last year, and since then, it basically showed that there is quite a bit of support for raising bridge tolls, which does not vary by income category, which I guess was the key finding. I guess the biggest criticism that opponents of ARM3 kind of levy against it is that it's regressive. It's basically falls on the commuters. You know, a lot of them are people who could afford it least because they commute here for jobs, and they're the ones that are paying the entirety of it. And basically, he's pointing to the poll that shows the traffic is so miserable, and so for them, it's a price worth paying if it's going to help their commute.
Yeah.
Even if it is a bit expensive.
It's hundreds of dollars, though, more each year for the average commuter.
Yeah, I mean, JOCELYN estimated it's about $1,000 when you consider, like, you know, all the bridge tolls. So yeah, it's quite a bit.
Yeah.
And I should also point out, though, that even though the measure does authorize $3 increase, it's not going to be all at once. So it is a gradual step increase, I think, between now and 2025, I believe.
Yeah.
So.
I think some critics have also charged that this is really mission creep. I mean, if you've got people crossing bridges, charging them tolls to pay for bridges, bridge fixes, upgrades, other bridges, I mean, that's one thing, but to take that specific and narrow subset and have them paying for BART and Caltrain and interchanges elsewhere, you know, maybe that is not exactly fair, but it's easy.
It is, and I think the counter argument to that is that just like the people who commute bridges, who use bridges to commute, are the people who basically rely on regional transportation sources as opposed to localized ones. Like in the same way that BART and Caltrain crosses county lines, and the 92-101 interchange, and then the Barton Bridge. I think the nexus that kind of ties them together is that they're all kind of regional projects. None of them is really centered on making like a big improvement for a particular city.
I see.
So even though, you know, BART and Caltrain are not bridges and bridge tolls are paying for them, I think proponents of ARM3 would say that even though they're not bridges, their scope is so regional that the nexus is there, and it does make sense to kind of help them pay for it.
I had a question. I know that it's going to go out to voters in all 9 counties. So what will it take to pass?
Just a majority.
The majority of all
Yeah.
voters in all counties?
All the voters combined, they get 50%. And I think in the past, this is the 3rd regional measure that's why it's called ARM3. And in the past, I think the first 2 measures, they've pretty much gotten the support from every county, but I think ARM2, from what I've seen, the Solano County actually only like 40% supported it, but it still passed. So nobody gets a veto power, but if they get more than 50% from the combined area, it would pass.
So Santa Clara County voters might think, now wait a minute, didn't we just fund transportation last year? That's a different method, so sales tax.
Yeah, they're funding transportation in various ways. There's the new gas tax that everyone's paying for.
State gas tax.
Yeah, the state gas tax. Then there's the Measure B funding that the county passed, which is a sales tax. And yeah, this is the third. This is the third kind of tax that could, or toll that could be added to the mix.
Yeah.
Which I think for people like JOCELYN goes a little too far. And one of the reasons why he's skeptical about this and why he opposes it is precisely because of those other methods. Because we just had those two increases, he believes that adding this third one at this point is just kind of a little too much, especially for people who don't make too much money, who commute long distances. So, but of course, the people who support RM3 believe that the transportation crisis is so terrible that, as Mark Berman put it, it's all hands on deck situation. We need absolutely everything. And so this is just the latest piece, especially with questions over federal funding. That's a whole other headache.
Yeah, that's a whole another kettle of fish. So those who oppose RM3, what are they thinking a solution would be?
They think a solution, well, they think the solution would have been better if, at least, they don't all speak with the same voice, but I know, like, let's say Lenny Siegel, for example. For him, the issue is the process and how this was formed. So he believes the solution would have been better if the MTC consulted local agencies first and kind of got their take on what projects should be included, as opposed to giving them the list and asking for support.
He said there was no, either no or not enough consultation with the cities.
That's right, and he's kind of he thinks a lot about regional transportation issues. He's on the VTA's, like kind of the local officials advisory group. I forget its name, but he says that despite the fact that he's on the VTA, he hasn't really heard about this until it was already kind of like a done deal. And for him, there's 237 is kind of a big deal in his area because you have this kind of rail that's not used much out there. And it could be a good connection between Mountain View and the East Bay. And he was concerned that this list didn't really do anything about that, even though that would be a regional project that he felt should have been on it. So I think for some of them, the solution is get better projects. And for others, it's get more equitable funding mechanisms. Don't put it all on the shoulders of the commuters, basically.
Yeah, there's some people who also want to have more housing near jobs so people aren't commuting quite so fast. That is not necessarily a transportation fix. It's more of a where the people are in relationship to their jobs and how people are getting there.
Yeah, that's absolutely true, but that is also a bigger issue that kind of ties up all the crises.
Yeah. So I sense that Lenny thinks that there was some politics involved in choosing the projects.
I think he thinks the MTC was a bit aloof.
Okay.
In some ways, there's
Was it influenced though by representatives or?
It was just a little too top down, not enough outreach. In some ways, maybe it's not enough politics. You didn't have to deal with the local politicians to put this together.
Yeah, I thought there was something in your article from a week ago that indicated that maybe the Dumbarton corridor got a little bit more money thanks to some pressure.
Yeah, nobody likes politics as an abstraction, but when it gets down to the nitty-gritty of putting a bill together, it obviously kind of takes place. I think when we were talking with Carl Gardino, like Jerry Hill phoned in to kind of talk to us about his support for RM3, and he said his biggest thing was that this was not political at all. That's why he supports it, is because MTC's professional staff put together this list, bang for the buck, shovel ready, all these things, kind of objectively best projects. And then when I was talking to Mark Berman, he was very gung-ho about Dumbarton. He made a big deal out of the fact that he and Jerry Hill worked on getting more funding for the buses and all that. So politics were somewhat involved, but
it was largely the staff with some influence.
Yeah, I think that seems like a fair assessment.
Yeah. All right. Is there anything else that we should cover on this issue?
I was just wondering, if it's approved, when would the first improvements start happening?
That's a tough question.
Yeah.
Just because there's dozens of projects in there, and it spans such a big period that I guess it would just depend on which project you're talking about. But
It's not gonna be like 25 years from
Well, I wouldn't expect anything too soon in this area, just because the two projects here are Dumbarton, which is right now all it is a plan. And I mean, if all they're doing is boosting bus services, I can't imagine there'd be too much delay. But if you're talking about things like changing the 101, 92 interchange, these things usually take quite a few years just to do the outreach and the design work and environmental work. So, this could end up, solving that choke point, but I don't expect that to go quickly.
And I think some of these projects are already in the works in terms of the planning and design has already happened. They're just waiting for some of the funding. I'm talking about the regional ones because BART to Santa Clara has been, we've been paying for that for a while now. So
Yeah, I know San Francisco's been hard at work on all the Caltrain and Transbay Terminal and all that, so they won't be starting from scratch by any means. But in terms of the things that are here in this area, and there might be some things also like enhanced ferry service to Redwood City, for example. That's part of the package. I'm not sure how many people will take ferries and how many people commute from Redwood City to Palo Alto.
sounds quaint.
It sounds charming, but if that's unveiled quickly, you could have little things that pop up sooner than the big ones.
Yeah. One thing that I wanted to mention was that not only would the increase be to $8 by 2025, it would also, not by approval of voters, continue to increase according to the Consumer Price Index. So the vote would authorize that.
That's true. Yeah. So it's probably going to be more than $8 eventually.
Eventually.
But yeah.
All right.
Point.
Okay. Well, hopefully the readers have taken, or voters have taken something from our discussion. You can always check on the ballots online. There's a lot of resources at the Santa Clara County Voters, Register of Voters. So that wraps it up for this week. You can always find Palo Alto News on paloaltoonline.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And if you'd like to get notification of our webcast, just hit the subscribe button below. We'll see you next week.